I proclaim 2026 the year of the buddy read. Well, 2025 is coming to a close, so it's time to look ahead at 2026 and figure out what I'm going to read. Now, I approach this video differently every year. Sometimes I set goals, sometimes I kind of have plans plus goals. This year, this is basically just my reading plans for 2026. Now, this is not everything that I'll be reading, obviously. I'll have read over 100 books this year, and this is a small percentage of that. But these are some of the big plans of things that I plan on doing next year and reading and things that you'll see on the channel. As I mentioned, I'm calling this the year of the buddy read. I have 6 buddy reads lined up. 5 of them are book series, 4 different genres, and 1 book that's kind of cross genres. But I'm really excited for that because I'm going to be reading with some great friends here on BookTube, and you can join us as well. For all of the buddy reads, I'll let you know roughly when they're going to happen or if there is a specific schedule, and then you can probably expect some live streams. You can definitely expect some chatter in the Discords and things like that. So let's get started with kind of the big book series of the year. I had been thinking about what I wanted to read for 2026, and as I was reflecting upon this year and last year, I haven't read as much science fiction as I normally do. So I figured a great way to do that is to set up a buddy read. So I reached out to Jonathan at Words in Time. Jonathan has been my go-to for recommendations in the science fiction genre, and we came up with The Gap Cycle by Stephen R. Donaldson. Now, this is more of a little less popular series than a lot of other things in the science fiction genre that I still have yet to read, but Jonathan's read everything, so we had to pick something he hadn't read before. So when Jonathan proposed The Gap Cycle, I was already intrigued because Stephen R. Donaldson was an author that I wanted to read next year. I was originally going to reread the first Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever, which is a fantasy series which I read as a youth and wanted to reread as an adult. So I can put that off a little bit because I have these 5 books of The Gap Cycle scheduled, and I'm excited to read these. But when I did just the smallest bit of research to find out about this series, I became even more intrigued. One of the big influences of this 5-book series is The Ring of the Nibelung by Richard Wagner, which is quite literally my favorite operas. I've been a huge fan of Wagner's operas, especially The Ring of the Nibelung, The Ring Cycle, since I first encountered them in college. And I own 2 DVD productions. I have multiple recordings of them that I love. I even took a trip to New York City specifically to see one of these operas at one point. So I'm very excited to see how some of these influences make their way into The Gap Cycle. The story of the Ring Cycle is gods and Valkyries, and it has a lot of mythological basis and has magical creatures and magical items, and it's just a great story. So I'm very interested to see how those come into The Gap Cycle by Donaldson. I have heard The Gap Cycle is brutal. I've heard brutal but worth it. I've also heard that if you pick a trigger warning, The Gap Cycle probably has it. So it's going to be kind of a tough read at times. So I'm looking forward to having Jonathan to be able to talk through these things. But we have this in a schedule. So if you're interested in joining us, we will be starting this at the beginning of the year. Our schedule is the first 3 books, January, February, March. And then the last 2 books, which are a bit thicker, we're going to spread those out over 2 months. So April and May for the 4th book, and June and July for the 5th book. But I'm really looking forward to reading The Gap Cycle next year. So that was my sci-fi. For my historical fiction buddy read, I'm going to be reading The Century Trilogy by Ken Follett. So one of my good friends on BookTube is Kyle from Read by Kyle, and Kyle reached out and said, hey, let's do a buddy read. And I thought it was going to be a huge challenge for us to find something because I read a lot. I'll read over 100 books this year. Kyle will read over 300 books this year. So because of that, there's a lot of things that we've already read, but we settled upon pretty quickly The Century Trilogy by Ken Follett. We are both big fans of Pillars of the Earth and the Kingsbridge books, and this is his series. I mean, the Kingsbridge books are connected novels that are connected by setting but separated by a century or more between books. So it's not really a book series, but the Century Trilogy takes part in the 20th century. I think it follows 3 or 4 families throughout the entire century over these 3 books. But this is a trilogy that's thick. I mean, you probably saw the B-roll. I'm sure I've rolled that already, but these are really big books, about 1,000 pages apiece. So this is the longest series in page counts of anything that I have on the schedule for next year. So we do have a schedule plan for this, and this is going to be spread out a bit more because the books are so big. And it's not a concrete schedule. We're going to read one per quarter, but we're going to start in the second quarter of the year. So as early as April, as late as June, we'll be reading the first book of the Century Trilogy. And I'm looking forward to reading it and talking about the book with Kyle. All right, on to 2 fantasy buddy reads. The first is with John from Talking Story. This will be the 3rd year in a row that John and I do a buddy read together. And we've kind of said, like, let's do this forever. So, like, tune in 20 years from now, if there's still a YouTube, like, John and I will be on our, like, 23rd series or something like that. But we've been picking some series that are a little off the beaten path because both of us have read a lot of the major works. So we read Brian Lee Durfee's series 2 years ago, loved it. This past year we read The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. It became a favorite of both of ours. Next year we're going to read the Between Earth and Sky trilogy by Rebecca Roanhorse. And this was highly influenced by The Broken Binding. We are both subscribers to their fantasy subscription, and these editions are gorgeous. But even beyond that, I'm very intrigued that this is Aztec, I think, inspired fantasy. So looking for a very different kind of fantasy experience, and I love that we're going to get something quite different here. Additionally, this is not like crazy chunky series either, so that's kind of refreshing too. So we're looking forward to reading this together. We haven't set exact dates, but we just said roughly like mid-year, something like that, we'll start. So John and I will get together and we'll start those, and we'll have some live chats and all of that. But I look forward to reading this Rebecca Roanhorse trilogy with John. So the other fantasy buddy read is one of my favorite authors in the genre, Robin Hobb. Well, I've read everything by Robin Hobb, but I've been reading the Megan Lindholm side of her works. Both are pseudonyms, if you didn't know that. Well, Megan Lindholm wrote a lot of books, and I'm almost done. I have 5 left, and 4 of them are in this series called the Key and Vandian Quartet. So that's the buddy read. I reached out to Evie from She Was Only Evie, because Evie is a huge mega Robin Hobb fan like me, too. So we're going to read this at some point. What's really refreshing about this is how short these books are. I mean, like, all 4 of these books is probably one book in the realm of the Elderlings. They're about 200, 250 pages. So we don't have a schedule yet, but we'll fit those in at some point. Probably won't be too hard to fit them in. This was Megan Lindholm's first novel, Harpy's Flight, so I'm interested to see where her career started because, you know, she wrote The Realm of the Elderlings, which has become my favorite book series. So really exciting to see kind of these early books by Lindholm. So Evie and I will read these at some point this year. And Derry, I'm going to tag you to see if you want to jump in on this because we all know that Derry is the biggest Robin Hobb fan in the universe, so maybe she'll want to join us with Harpy's Flight and the rest of this Key and Vandian quartet. So we had sci-fi, we had historical fiction, we had fantasy. What's up? Crime fiction. So one of my big priority authors this past year is I've been reading the works of Don Winslow, and I read 4 books by him this year. Fantastic writer. I love the diversity of what he writes, and he's really, really talented. So I wanted to read more Don Winslow, so Buddy Read is a way to put it in ink on the schedule. So I reached out to Carlos from StoryTube, and we settled upon reading the duology, The Dawn Patrol. And this is a different kind of Winslow book. This is not kind of the big, intense epic like Power of the Dog and the Cartel trilogy, but this is kind of a different type of story. Shorter books for sure. Carlos, of course, you know, is one half of StoryTube, and his better half, Yolanda, she's read everything by Winslow. So it'll be exciting for both of us to read this and maybe have a chat with Yolanda afterwards about these books, because I enjoyed meeting some of these characters in the Dawn Patrol in the short story collection of Winslow's called Broken. That's it. His short story collection, Broken, one of the stories had the characters from the Dawn Patrol. So I'm interested in reading this and talking with Carlos about these great works of crime fiction by Don Winslow. So the final buddy read is a single book, and it is a genre buster. If you had to pigeonhole it somewhere, you'd probably say sci-fi. The book is David Mitchell. The author is David Mitchell. The book is Cloud Atlas. The buddy read is with Joanna from Joanna Reads. So I was watching one of Joanna's videos recently, about a month ago, and she, I think at some point, talked about how she had Cloud Atlas on her shelf and hadn't read it yet. Well, I have a tab on my TBR spreadsheet, the books I really want to reread, and it was near the top. So I reached out to her and said, hey, let's read this together sometime next year. So it'll be Joanna's first time reading Cloud Atlas. It will be a reread for me. I'm very intrigued about the reread, knowing, without giving any spoilers, the unorthodox structure of this book, because I didn't know that going in, and I found it just fascinating. But knowing the structure of Cloud Atlas is going to make it even more interesting. And of course, chatting with Joanna afterwards will definitely enrich my experience of reading Cloud Atlas. So it's a single book. We'll fit it in when our schedules can align sometime next year. All right, next thing to talk about is the Fireside Book Club. If you're new here, I am part of the Fireside Discord. I'm one of the owners with Joanna from Joanna Reads, Matt from Matt on Books, and our mod is Evie from She Was Only Evie. Well, once a quarter we get together and we read something together, have a live stream on one of our channels, and this has been a lot of fun. We did 2 of these last year, and this will continue into next year, starting in January with our first quarter read. One thing that's very cool about this, though, is that the Fireside Discord actually picks our book. Kind of. The 4 of us each nominate a book anonymously, and then the Discord votes over the span of a week, and the winning book gets read. And that's been a lot of fun because it's a way for me to pick something on my physical TBR, which I'll talk about that later this video. My physical TBR, try to getting that a little smaller by 1 book, but also it's been fun just to see what the Discord wants us to read and what they want to read along with us. So we've had some really good discussions in the channels that we open up in the Discord. So there will be 4 of those next year, so that'll be 4 books that will be picked by us. Hopefully one of my books will get picked. None of mine got picked last year, so we'll see how that goes. So I have a couple reading projects that I have been doing. And when I call it a reading project, because this is a long-term project. One of these reading projects has been taking over 5 years. The other one I started about 2 years ago. I'm going to finish one, and then I'm going to start a new one. So I kind of have 3 reading projects, which will be part of some of the things that I read next year. First reading project, this is something I started well before I had a BookTube channel, and this is my Stephen King Dark Tower adjacent reads. What I wanted to do, I wanted to reread The Dark Tower, but first I wanted to reread everything around it. So I've been reading through all of those books. If you wonder what those are, go ahead and check out. I have a video I'll link up here, or here. I'm not sure which side. Up here in one of these corners, you will see a link to a video that I made with Stephen King reading advice. The last part of that, I talk about Dark Tower, and there's a slide at the end with all of the things that tie into the Dark Tower. That's what I've been rereading. Well, I'm down to 2 books. It was supposed to be 1 book, because the first book is Black House that he co-wrote with Peter Straub. It was originally in my November TBR, but I got behind schedule this month, so I had to push it off till probably January, February. So I will read Black House, and then I'm going to read 11/22/63 as well as kind of the culmination of finishing that Dark Tower adjacent books. So that is pretty cool. About a 6-year project will come to a close next year. Now, the other project that's ongoing is my Stephen King short fiction project. I started this 2 years ago, and essentially I always have a short fiction collection going. And the way that I approach most short fiction is I simply, when I finish the main book that I'm reading, I read a short story or 2, kind of cleanse the palate before I start another big book. And I've been doing that with the Stephen King books being a priority. Probably about every other short fiction collection I've chosen has been by Stephen King. I am about 1/3 of the way through the short fiction collection, and I'm up to Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is going to take a while. And this is a project that's going to take the year and then some. I probably won't finish that project this year, but it is ongoing, so that is something that you will see on the channel. I've been doing what I call overview reviews, where I give an overview about what it's about, like the number of novellas and short stories in there, and then I give you a quick overview, summation of everything, give you some of my favorites for those. And I'm looking forward at some point finishing all the short fiction collections so I can do a big reader's guide to those as well. But I am enjoying that project, which will continue through 2026. Well, one project is closing, and I'm going to start a new one. I'm going to be starting a Michael Connelly project, and this is a Michael Connelly reread in publication order. I started my Connelly journey with about 5 books where I just bounced around. Like I picked one up, it was amazing, and then I picked up another one, and it was somewhere else in the chronology, and I kind of bounced around until I realized how great he is, how consistently great he is. and then I filled in the gaps in publication order. So like 80%, 80 to 90% of what I've read by Connolly has been in publication order, but I want to kind of go back and experience it. Now, this was, I have to admit, this was spurred on because me as a collector discovered something I didn't think I would find. I had been slowly acquiring all the hardcovers of the Connolly books, and I was resigned to the fact that the first 6 Bosch books, I would never find them, so I had the omnibus collections. Well, I found on eBay not just the first 6, but several first editions, mint condition, at a price that was a steal. And I was so excited to get these books. And now that I have these many first editions in my hands, I want to read these again. So that's why I'm starting this project. The plan for this project is 1 per quarter next year. So if I keep that pace for this project, this is a project which will last over a decade, because Connolly currently has 43 or 44 books out. So you do the math, divided by 4. Probably at some point I'll have to speed up, but I'm looking forward to starting with the first 4 books of Connolly's, and they're all 4 Harry Bosch books. So I look forward to rereading those and starting this new Michael Connolly project. So the last kind of reading plans is I will continue to prioritize my physical TBR. And this is a way to keep my purchasing under wraps, but also to just prioritize the things that are already on my shelf, and also prioritize the things that you send me. I know that a lot of you look at my Amazon wish list and send me things periodically, and I usually try to move those to the top of the queue, or at least near the top of the queue as best as I can. And I try to prioritize those. But my physical TBR, if you remember last year, I said my goal was to reduce it by at least 1 book. I've done okay. Beginning of the year, it was at 97. Currently, as I'm filming this, it's at 83, which the math doesn't math because I've read 100 books this year and my physical TBR is only down 15. Anyway, but it's better. It'll be below 80 by the end of the year, depending on Christmas. So maybe it won't. I don't know. But it'll be less than 97. I want to continue to just do that. Prioritize the books that I have on my shelf. Like my wish list, I only put the things I'm really, really wanting to read right now. So those are things I don't mind bumping up to the top of the list. And the things on my shelves, you know, I look at them and I'm like, man, I can't wait to read that one. So that's kind of the last reading plan for 2026. It's just to continue to prioritize that physical TBR. So hey, those are some of my plans. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you've read any of these series that I'm going to be buddy reading. Let me know, of course, spoiler free, because I haven't read them yet. And I would, of course, love to hear what you're planning on reading in 2026. What's the one thing you're most looking forward to reading next year? Let me know that in the comments section below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.